Welcome to the Johnny Dale Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game. Today is Friday, December 15th. We are going to go over the whys and hows of what beating Arizona looks like. We are also joined by Steph Sanchez to talk about how she thinks the season has gone. All this and more, you're inside the Johnny Dale Football Academy. Hello again, Niner faithful, and welcome into the channel that answers the whys and hows of the game by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, reminding you, as always, the most fun to watch is on YouTube, where we go live. There you can comment into the live show. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you can be part of the conversation. We also stream live on Facebook and X. Also, the audio versions are always found on the usual suspects, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, if you are live with us in the chat, it's probably because you are subscribed and have hit the notification bell. So, when you are sharing with friends, other Niner faithful, your family, be sure to let them know, hit the notification bell. Also, if you're live with us, be sure to boost the algorithm, and that is by typing in hashtag JD49. If you would like to show some love to our wonderful guest, why don't you hit the hashtag Steph? Go ahead and hit the hashtag Steph to show some love. We welcome in Steph Sanchez. Thank you and good morning. How are you?
Good morning, fellas. It's good to be back on. It's been a minute, right? And I know we're going to talk about a lot of the differences from the team since the last time we spoke. So I'm excited to get into it. It's a great time to be a 49ers fan right now. So just along for the ride.
Awesome. Real quick, Steph, we'll do this again, but go ahead and let everyone know your where we can find you as well. There may be, if there are some weirdos in the chat who just don't know about you, I don't know who in the world that would be, but go ahead. You can see the love, the hashtag Stephs, all the people boosting the algorithm, showing love to you, Steph. But for those that don't know, just real quick, drop your social medias, your channels, where we can find you.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own YouTube channel. I do my own podcast. My podcast is called 49 Carrots Podcast. You can find that the audio version wherever you get your podcast. And of course, my YouTube is where I usually stream live at Steph49K. That is also the username for my Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever I share any content, Steph49K.
Gotta have it. Love it. So, real quick, before we get into more stuff with Johnny, because he's getting antsy. I know he is. I want to
I'm
ask
good. I'm
personally.
good.
I want to ask personally, Steph, because I don't know. Can you give us the quick overview of how you got started and where your love for the Niners began?
Yeah, I mean, my love for the Niners came from, I guess, being close with my brother and watching him love the 49ers and like all the Bay Area sports teams. But for some reason, like the 49ers just had I think, a bigger hold on him than any of the other teams. And so I kind of gravitated to that naturally. And so I started watching, I don't know, I was maybe like, 12-ish or something like that. And quite frankly, the 49ers were bad during that time. So I guess it might have been a good time to come in, show that I'm faithful. But yeah, I've seen this team like grow and went through the hardball years, the lull that happened after that, and now we're in some really great times. So it's been awesome to see, but I'm still waiting to witness my first Super Bowl
Wow, awesome. So
win,
I'm
I should say,
curious.
win.
Yeah. So I'm curious
That
that.
makes me feel old, Steph.
Yeah, me too. Like what?
Because I was 10 years old watching the 49ers win their fifth Super Bowl.
I was
And like
13.
I
I
had
was
bet my
3.
entire piggy bank on the NFC Championship game with a friend of mine who was a Dallas Cowboys fan in the fourth grade. So like yeah, I'm feeling a little old there when you say you're waiting for the 49ers to win their first Super Bowl. I'm like, dang.
I was
Like, or in your
alive. I just
lifetime. I mean,
wasn't.
yeah.
I just wasn't.
Didn't
Conscious.
witness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's still, but still, like I remember so much of that '94 Super Bowl. Like it's just yeah. I'm like,
It's on
dang, I'm
mute.
getting old, man. Like, yeah, that's why I wear the hat so nobody can see the gray hair.
So what do you guys want to get into first? A lot has happened since you guys last talked. I don't even know where to start, Johnny.
So I have to take a sidebar. And I told Steph about this and you, Adam.
Shocker.
I
We're
have to take
shocked.
a sidebar because I put together the notes this morning and then I hopped on X on Twitter right after that. And I saw a tweet. I had to respond. And then it got me so fired up that I've got to talk about it. I've got to, we're the channel. We talk about some of the whys and hows. And so I've got to show this
You
and
had to
we've got
respond,
to talk about it
guys. You
because
had
I
to.
think this is such a symptom of so much of the conversation happening around Brock Purdy. So first, we're gonna play this little video. Hopefully, everybody can kind of see this for the most part. I don't have my normal two screens for showing stuff like this because, well, I wasn't planning on doing this. But this is Benjamin Solak. I believe he works for the Ringer, and this is quick little video he put on Twitter about Brock Purdy, and this is some of
This is just
the things that happen.
evil nonsense. Kyle Shanahan is a wizard, and he shouldn't be allowed in the league. Concept. George Kittle's running this like short post right here, and then Brandon Ayuk's going to run this dig. And initially, you want to throw one of those two kind of in the intermediate window. You're going to get pivot route out here. Christian McCaffrey's flat control. Deebo Samuel sits down on the curl. Deebo's supposed to pull this linebacker down, so that way you can throw Brandon Ayuk. What happens? Well, Bobby Wagner doesn't pull too far to Deebo, right? And we have this Jordan Brooks here, this drop-in linebacker with eyes and hips into that window. So if you want to throw this, you're clogged up, and this player can play on it. So I don't like this anymore. Purdy's eyes are on Kittle, right? Purdy says, okay, if you, Jordan Brooks, are going to open to the three receiver side, I'm going to throw this post in behind you, right? But the coverage here is actually really tight, right? This is good, tight coverage on Kittle. There's no window there. So Purdy's off it, right? He just resets in the pocket, one hitch, just dump this off to Deebo Samuel. Beautiful. Now, the line of scrimmage, you can see right there, was the 25-yard line. So this is a 2 air yards throw. Deebo's got it at 27. Pause the video and guess how many yards Deebo Samuel gets on this play. $30. Nobody gets to do this, dude. No, this is so dumb.
Okay. So, here's a problem I have with that, and just make sure everybody caught what was happening there. So he's talking about Purdy getting to a check down basically with Deebo Samuel and how, now Deebo Samuel can take it 30 yards and no quarterback in the league can do that, can just dump a check down and get 30 yards. And this is now used as a negative against Brock Purdy. Here's the problem I have with this is that he's showing a 1 minute and 20-second clip on Twitter that is disingenuous to what actually happened in the game. So I had to pull the film on this, and I responded to him. I quote tweeted on Twitter, and I'm going to explain exactly what I talked about on Twitter here. So that was the third time in the game that we ran this play. And this is why I don't like some of this stuff where people, because he's pulling a clip from the fourth quarter and talking about it in a vacuum. Well, this is the very first quarter. And what you're going to see is first watch, you're going to see Kyle Juszczyk's going to come in motion here. He comes in motion, and then you're going to see Christian McCaffrey kind of do this bump motion out wide or kind of widen motion. And so they're running this same concept. Okay, down here, they're going to have Kittle on this little short curl. They're going to have Deebo on what's called a basic route. It's a 12 to 14-yard in route. And now Brandon Ayuk out here, I believe he runs an out route. But it's the same. Kyle calls this pull shallow. I've known this as what's called the sucker concept. A good example, everybody remember the catch three? That was a very similar concept to this. They ran a short curl and then a post behind it. This is the same idea. You're running a short curl and a basic route in behind it. The idea is you're going to pull the underneath coverage and open up the space behind it. So Seattle here is in cover three. So you have a deep middle third. You have a deep third out here, deep third. Bobby Wagner is playing a hook curl. Jordan Brooks is playing a hook curl. Okay. So what the idea is, you're putting Bobby Wagner in a vertical stretch. So here we have a vertical stretch on Bobby Wagner, but this is not Madden, okay? So just because you have this guy in a vertical stretch does not mean that the defense is just going to sit there and allow you to do these kinds of things. Pete Carroll has specific rules for how they're going to do this. Now, sometimes, normally what you'd see if this route comes up here, Bobby Wagner would call under, and he's going to carry the deeper route, and Jordan Brooks is going to match the under route because they're going to call under. And it's things we can't hear on the broadcast, but is in their playbook. What ends up happening here is Bobby Wagner kind of sort of sits, but doesn't really commit. And you see Jordan Brooks is the backside hook player. Now this is what we have to understand, is that this is where Brock Purdy is reading. He's reading this play. He kind of sees that Bobby Wagner's sitting back, and he's going to drive on it because Jordan Brooks is supposed to pick up anything on the vertical. If this goes all the way vertical, the safety's going to pick it up. If this breaks in, Jordan Brooks is going to pick it up. And so Purdy wanted to throw it. You saw him. He pulls it down because he sees Bobby Wagner attacking. Okay, comes for a sack. Now, fast forward to the and we'll see it from the end zone because I included the end zone. And I pulled these clips literally this morning because I was so kind of fired up. And you're going to see him. He's looking to it, pulls it down, ends in a sack. All right. Very next drive. This is the very next drive. You're going to see this same motion. You're going to see Juszczyk move out, and then you're going to see Christian McCaffrey move. Same exact backfield motion. There goes Juszczyk. Here goes Christian McCaffrey. And what it is, we flip this play. Okay, so we're just running it on the other side. So you're going to have Kittle's going to come up here, run this little curl sit, and you're going to have Debo on this basic route. And then now, instead of running Ayuk on a 10-yard out route, we're going to run him on what's called a widen hammer or widen post. So he's going to widen this route out, and then he's going to run a post route. And the reason why you're doing this is, again, because what did Seattle do the last drive with this same concept? How did they match it? They matched under and over. So now you go to the sideline and you see we had this spot, this void that was created by how Seattle was matching that route by the backside hook player. So you're seeing how that this is part of when Kyle talks about they talk about him scripting the first plays and what they're looking for. This is what they're looking for. And this is what would drive people so nuts about Jimmy Garoppolo throwing early game picks. Because when he would get those looks, he would try and jam that ball in there and he'd throw a pick and he put the team behind the 8 ball. Here, Brock Purdy pulls it down. He's avoiding that big negative on that first drive because guess what? You're going to be able to go to the sideline. Kyle Shanahan's going to be able to sit there with you. Brian Grease is going to sit there with you. We're going to look at what did they do to take away what one of our staple plays, and now we can attack them against it. So, and again, they're showing too high here. All right, so they're showing too high. Brock Purdy, let's run this at a little bit slower speed. He's going to have to see this post snap. Once this comes out, boom. Now we're dropping down. We're in cover 3 buzz. So these safeties are rotating, and you're in cover 3. Same coverage, same rules for the defensive players, but different players in different spots. So now you have Jamal Adams in the backside hook curl. So again, we're running this basic. We're running a short curl. So Purdy is looking this way. Why? Because he knows, according to how Seattle's game plan for this play, for this concept, based upon the previous series, that Jamal Adams is going to match this basic route. And Bobby Wagner is going to match the short curl. And so he looks over here and watch Jamal Adams here. He's going to, oh, there he goes. See, he's starting to shift. Because that's what he's looking for. That's what Purdy is looking for. He's not necessarily saying, I'm guessing this is going to be there. Once he sees Jamal Adams drift that way, now he's looking to Ayuk. Because now you have this void created. And there he's in the throwing motion. And watch how early he's going to throw this ball. This ball comes out here, I believe it's either the 38 or the 42. Is where it comes out in. So he's throwing it way early, super anticipation. Yeah, it's 36. Big anticipation into that window. Okay, that's awesome. You saw it ran this play earlier. You came back the next drive. Now you saw how they matched it. and now you're going to take advantage. And you're going to see Brock Purdy's eyes. He's going to look to his left. He's going to see Jamal Adams come over here, and then he's going to, boom, hit the pass on this backside. I love it. This is what is so great about this offense with Brock Purdy. He's looking left, then boom, Jamal Adams goes over there. Or sorry, Julian Love, not Jamal Adams. But now, this is the play in the fourth quarter. We're going to start out with this McCaffrey motion, and you get Love come down. So they've declared cover 3, and you're going to run this same concept. You're going to take Debo, you're going to run him on a short curl, you're going to run Ayuk on this in route, and now you're going to take Kittle, and you're going to run him on the widened hammer or the backside post. Okay, so how did Seattle play this last time? Again, they had a hook, they matched, and they matched. And so you had this throw right here. Well, now Seattle's gone to the sideline. They've talked about how they're going to play this in the future because we just got burned for a big chunk gain. So now as Brock Purdy drops back, who's he reading? This guy. Why? Because he's trying to see, is he coming up here to match this the same way? So he sees he is. He's shaded towards this way like they showed earlier, but he never commits. And he looks over to Kittle, and Kittle now this backside corner is waiting on that widen hammer route. They've seen it. So he pulls off of it, and he sees, okay, Bobby Wagner's drifted back, and now he's going to check it down. Kyle Shanahan offered this play as his favorite play of the day from Brock Purdy because he got to the right answer, and it was a big explosive. See, now he checks it down. And yes, you get a big play, but why was Debo as open as he was? Again, because of the previous plays that had happened and how Brock Purdy had played that. Is that this was not the first time Seattle saw this. And you're not seeing that Brock Purdy is just guessing. We've had that times in the past where this route was open the first time. And so now we're just going to throw this again because it was there and we get the same coverage. He's not guessing on what the coverage is doing. He's not saying, well, they did this last time. I'm just going to jam this ball in here and throw a pick to Jordan Brooks or the corner. He's reading the defense as they're playing it each play. People do not understand how big of a deal that is. So often, quarterbacks, if they see this stuff, are going to be just operating as this is what happened last time. I'm going to make the same throw. I look off the same way and I make the same throw. You do not see that with Brock Purdy. So this whole idea that him throwing a small check down and this being something that no other quarterback in the league gets away with because he's able to do it and get an explosive play. And so it's ridiculous that we're even talking about him in the MVP race or anything like that is insane to me. And I hate that we're talking about play in a vacuum because this was not the first time we ran that play against that coverage. So that's why I'm a little fired up. And so I'll hand it over to you guys. I need to get a drink of coffee.
Steph, what do you say to that?
I mean, I think that was an awesome breakdown as Johnny does very often and tells us the in and outs of the play. I do feel like a lot of these guys that are trying to maybe discredit Brock Purdy, and they say, like, I'm not trying to discredit. I mean, you kind of are when you show these plays again in a vacuum with no context. You're cherry picking which play, and out of all the plays that were there in this game that Brock made that were great and that showed how good of a quarterback he is, he chose a check down. And I mean, Kyle did say that was his favorite play of the day from Brock, but it was because of the context that that was missed in Benjamin's breakdown there. I do like Benjamin, and I do like his analysis of the game and all that. He's a very bright dude. But
and again, and I don't mean that as a big slight on Benjamin. What and again, I don't know if it's people if they're not paying really close attention, and it just may be my weird personality to remember. Like I saw that immediately, and I remembered the other two plays that were there. I don't know, maybe that's just a weird thing with me, of seeing that, or if it's that. So it maybe belies the fact of that somebody has an opinion on Brock Purdy and they see things like this and it's that confirmation bias thing that this confirms what they already believe about Brock Purdy and they're not open to seeing the trail of evidence that is there. And this is why Kyle Shanahan always comes back and says, well, if people are watching the film and they're paying attention, then they'll see and this is the kind of stuff that for me, I look at and I go, when I see that, yes, I'm a 49ers fan. Yes, I really like Brock Purdy. I was not sold on Brock Purdy when he came in. I remember I was in the chat in one of John Chapman's shows early, like middle of the season last year, and he was talking about how, if the 49ers, if Jimmy Garoppolo goes down, then the 49ers have to turn to Brock Purdy, seventh round pick. And how do you feel about that? And I put in the chat, I said, that sounds pretty scary. Because I was with everybody else. And there was a seventh round pick.
Yeah.
If our season is put in the hands of a seventh round pick, we're screwed. Like I did not come in as a guy who wanted to just be like, yes, Brock Purdy's a great quarterback and he's doing amazing, great things. It was, I remember my wife can attest this too. She's probably not in the chat because she's had the stomach flu, but I was like in a bad way after the Miami game last year. Like just mentally, even though we won, I was like, our season's done. Like it's over. It's another time. Like we have a seventh round pick at quarterback. We're done. Like this is it. I don't know what's gonna happen in the future. Like I was in a bad way. Then I watched the film, and then I was like, you know what? That was better than I thought it would be. That was a lot better than I thought it would be. And then seeing everything from then, so I don't mean this as a slight to Benjamin because, like you said, he is a bright dude, and there's some things that he put us out there that are good. I feel this is like part of the Brock Purdy narrative. We heard it from Cam Newton, this week, and we're hearing it from different guys that this is why they say, he doesn't deserve the MVP because he can check it down to Debo, and it's a 30-yard gain. And I just feel like it's not looking at the totality of what he's actually doing.
And going back to like the last few games, like before the Eagles game, for example, I felt like the 49ers weren't relying on yards after the catch like they did in years past at all. You barely even saw it. And that was because Brock Purdy's like, they don't need to rely on it. They're driving the ball downfield. Brock Purdy can throw downfield every week. We see like a new wrinkle to his game, a different throw he can make that we hadn't really seen before from him. And so like all those things, like, yeah, I'm taking issue, I guess, with people saying, oh, he just benefits from that. Every quarterback benefits from the skill players that they have. I know a lot of people have pointed out, the year that Patrick Mahomes won, he benefited from a lot of yards after the catch. He had Tyreek Hill, who in his own right this year is up for MVP consideration, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's a little unfair to take away from what Brock Purdy has done just because, oh, he has this genius play caller and he has Debo who, can take a simple check down and take it 30 yards. Well, why was that guy open? Why was he able to do that? Those are the things that not everyone is talking about. Everyone can watch the film, but if you don't know, I guess like it takes a lot to really know and understand like what you're actually watching. And you can know the X's and O's of the game, but like if you don't really understand the X's and O's of that specific scheme, or like how Johnny, like you noticed that they had ran that same play several times in the same game and how it set up that exact play that he highlighted. Like did Benjamin notice that? Those are the things that you can't
Right.
always depend on other people to know. That they can watch film till they're blue, and maybe they don't see that context, right? Like maybe they just don't get all of that in depth look at the game. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating, I guess. But the guys at the Ringer, Steven Ruiz is another one who's just been like very adamant on tearing down any argument for Brock Purdy being a good quarterback. That
They
one to
still have him
me,
like ranked like 23rd in the league,
yeah,
something like that.
that
I
one
mean, it's just
smells as
absurdity at this
confirmation
point.
bias. Yeah, that one stinks.
Like it's got to be a shtick at this point. Like it's
It
got to
is.
be. He
Yeah.
cannot believe he's what he's doing is he's seeing every time he posts something really negative about Brock Purdy, the Niner faithful come out with their
Yeah.
pitchforks and he
Yeah.
gets the engagement
Yeah.
and he's blowing up on Twitter and he's like, "Yeah, keep doing it. I'm going to keep stoking this fire because every time they come out with their pitchforks, they're going to, it's building that engagement and that's what it's all about." So it's got to be a shtick at this point. I just don't believe that he actually believes like that Brock Purdy is in the bottom third of the league in quarterbacks. You can't believe that. You can't look at what's happening, and you don't have a quarterback who's last in passing attempts and third in yards and just believe, yeah. And I mean, yeah, we could put anybody in there. We could haul Steve out of retirement right now, and he'd be probably first in the league in yards. With this, like, I mean, come on, people. It's like Kurt Warner says about this stuff. You don't just fall into this stuff. It doesn't just happen, and so yeah, I'm getting really I guess tired of so many of the narratives here that are just that they're exactly that. They're narratives, and it's not based upon actual evidence because like I said, the plays are there and you can watch the things he does on film and it is just not normal stuff you see from quarterbacks. And it's so hard. I've had a few people comment, like I put out a video that Brock Purdy should be MVP and I was pulling clips from the last game and then several other games against top defenses. I purposefully picked
Jacksonville.
defenses that have been playing well.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to be people being like, well, yeah, anybody can do this against, the Rams defense or whatever. Like I didn't want to pull that and have that as things. I wanted it as defense that we're playing fairly well and showing, that Brock Purdy is moving through so many things. And I've had several comments of people being like, can you pull a whole bunch of film from other quarterbacks, other top quarterbacks and show if they are or aren't doing this thing? And I was like, well, that's a lot of work. I mean, Steph, watching through film, like just to hit play and watch through and not go back and rewind and actually like, because we don't know the play calls. So you have to figure out what the play calls were first and then go through the process of what did the quarterback look at and things on different plays. Just to hit play and play through once without doing that takes like an hour and 15 minutes. And so if I'm looking at like 10 Jalen Hurts games, that's 10 hours just to watch through it once, to actually like rewind, watch it again, rewind, watch it again, rewind, watch it in slow motion. Now you're talking like 50 hours just to watch 10 Jalen Hurts games and then 50 hours to watch Josh Allen and 50 hours to watch Patrick Mahomes. So, I love the idea that some people have there. I'm like, I don't got that much time. Maybe if I had Greg Cassell's staff, we could do that. But I personally can't do it.
We need someone to volunteer and get those man hours and just give you all that footage. Yeah. I have a few more questions for Steph. I want to talk defensively a little bit. So let's all get into our defensive mindset here. And again, we talked about earlier, a lot has happened since you last kind of checked in with the channel here, Steph. So a lot to go over. And the two main things that I wanted to get your opinion on is the overall aura of Steve Wilks, of how it's kind of changed from, oh, get this guy out of here, to like, oh, well, okay, I guess he could stay. And then what you think about Chase Daniels, who are the defensive MVP or Ps, if plural. What's your take on the
Did you
defense?
say Chase Daniel or did you mean Chase Young?
Did I say Chase Daniel?
Young.
You
Okay,
did.
yeah.
Like
Oh,
not the former quarterback,
I've
the
been watching
defensive
this.
end playing for the 49ers.
I knew what he meant.
I've been watching his channel along with JT's, and yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as Steve Wilks goes and people wanting to fire him, just a few short weeks ago, I'm starting to think maybe that's like the initiation for every defensive coordinator in San Francisco, because at one point, this fan base wanted to fire Saleh. At one point, they wanted to fire D'Amico. And so I think we just all have to practice some patience with these guys, especially I think Steve Wilks, knowing that he wasn't in the building, the past few years, right? I think there was a bit of a learning curve, a bit of an adjustment for him, getting to know his players and all that. Of course, like that bye week really seemed to help and get them to reset, what was wrong during that time. I mean, getting Chase Young definitely did help. We'll talk about that in a bit, but yeah, I was one who kind of discounted the impact of Steve Wilks being on the sideline, because I was like, there's just no way like that's really going to make any difference. And maybe it doesn't make a big difference in the grander scheme of things, but I do think the players really love having their defensive coordinator on the sideline. there's, anytime they're asked about it, even today, like they'll say how big that is to just have him there, be able to talk to him and relay information back and forth and things like that. So I think it's kind of, the defense was used to that, and that maybe they, to an extent, it helped them function a little bit better in game. And so I like that. And ever since Wilkes said, I'm sort of built for this in one of his pressers, I mean, it's been a completely different defense. He stood on business. That's the phrase of the past 2 weeks for this team. They stood on business. So Steve Wilkes definitely been part of that. I've been a fan of the adjustments that he's made. I think he has the secondary playing at a really high level. You see Ambry Thomas, looking great this year. Early in the season, like, I would not have wanted to see Ambry on the field. I thought even him being a backup, oh, that's too close to him potentially being on the field. But look at him, like, he's playing some great football. And I think one of the issues when, during the losing streak and during like the first half of the season, all too often, the front was disconnected from the back and all that. Like that's what a lot of people were saying. And you kind of see it, right? Like now they're playing more cohesive as a unit. And I mean, you've seen the numbers they've been kind of putting up, right? Or limiting offenses from putting up. And so I got to give credit to Wilkes on that. Now, the addition of Chase Young, I believe, of course, gave this defense a spark. I think it gave Nick Bosa a spark, knowing he has one of his buddies on his team. I've noticed, though, since the Philadelphia game, and Johnny, maybe you can tell me, like, why you think this is. I've noticed that Chase Young has now been, like, kind of relegated to just a passing down only kind of guy. And for the Philadelphia game, I was like, okay, maybe because he wasn't setting the edge too well, maybe that's how they felt. That game was more about containment and, keeping Jalen Hurts from, like,
Right.
gashing you and
Yeah.
running out of the pocket, things like that, limiting their run game. So I don't know if I thought maybe it was just game specific, but we kind of saw that again this past week, and we're seeing a lot more of Randy Gregory out there, who has been playing pretty well. But Johnny, like, why do you think that is, that, we're kind of seeing him just be there on, like, the third obvious passing downs?
So what I've generally noticed is that they're using him in a way that they're going to keep one of him or Bosa on the field at all times. So, like, he's coming in sometimes with that second wave defensive line so that he's out there and it'll be like him and a mix of either Randy Gregory or Cleveland Farrell. And then Bosa's out there and it's going to be Cleveland Farrell or Randy Gregory. So that the rotation hasn't been like all second wave, all first wave, because that's generally how we've been for like the last 3 years, is that they would have the starting defensive line and you would see all those guys. And then the next series would start, like they would do 2 series. And then the third series, you would see the second wave defensive line out there for the entire series. And then the next series coming, you'd have your starters again, 2 series, and then they're out. So the backup defensive line was all going to get an entire series about twice a game, 2 to 3 times a game. What I'm seeing now is that they're much more comfortable rotating multiple guys in. It's not as static. Now, some of that is injury, but you're seeing that sometimes I've seen Randy Gregory and Cleveland Farrell out there and Bosa and Young on the sideline. And I think what they're doing now is that they feel like any one of these 4 guys can win. And any one of these 4 guys can set the edge. And any one of these 4 guys can do what we're asking them to do. So now we can keep everybody fresh all the time. And you're seeing the impact of that on the pass rush. And one thing I love to see out of this last game was that they started doing and Adam knew it. I was calling for this back like at the Minnesota game. I was like, why aren't we seeing some of those 3 and 4 defensive end packages in the pass rush? Like, why aren't we seeing this? I want to see it so bad because we have the players that can do this. We weren't running anybody in that Charles Omenihu, Arden Key role that would come in as a third defensive end on pass rushing situations. And we saw that this last game, and I was so happy to see it. Because you'd see sometimes, and I loved how they were moving people around. Sometimes it would be Chase Young on the left, Nick Bosa on the right, and you'd have Randy Gregory standing over the guard. Sometimes it would be Nick Bosa on the left, Chase Young on the right, and Randy Gregory standing over the guard. Sometimes it was Randy Gregory on the left, Chase Young on the right, and Nick Bosa over the guard. And and they were moving guys around. At one point, they had Chase Young and Nick Bosa on the left, and you had Javon Kinlaw and Randy Gregory on the right. And it starts to become, people I don't think fully appreciate how much work that puts on on an offensive coach. Like the offensive line coach and the coordinator, they have to be on the same page now all week about all the different places that all these different guys can show up on, because Chase Young is going to present certain matchup problems against your tackles. So now you have to prepare both of your tackles and your guards against Chase Young. And now you have to prepare these guys against Nick Bosa. All of them. You have to prepare your center about going up against Nick Bosa, because there was a play that we lined up and Nick Bosa got a sack on where he was rushing against the center. And you have to prepare for, because it like Minnesota game, it was really simple. Nick Bosa was on the right like 95% of the time. And so they were going to bring a tight end over there and they were going to chip him there. And that's how they took care of Nick Bosa. You cannot do that anymore. Teams are going to have to spend hours upon hours preparing their team each week now for where you might have to face Nick Bosa. And how are you going to account for him? And now your quarterback has to be alert to where Nick Bosa is. He can't just say, okay, Nick Bosa's over there. I know I got protection. No, he's got to be aware. Okay, Nick Bosa's there. And now you're making him work more pre-snap where he's not able to look at the coverage. And now they're disguising more in the coverage and they're rotating things over. And it's you could see like I put it on Twitter and somebody was like, "Oh, don't over exaggerate." And because I said Wilkes put Drew Lock's brain in a blender the last game, because you could see and I get it. He threw for like 200 some yards or 240 yards, something like that. The guy was like, "Well, he still played a great game." I was like, "That's not what the film showed. The film showed that they had like a couple plays where like there was one play they threw a screen pass and the running back broke like 6 tackles and reversed it all the way across the field. They got like 40 yards, and then there was another play like I believe it was Oren Burks got hurt. Flanagan Fowles came in and he busted a coverage and they got like 30 some more yards. Okay, that was like 60 of Drew Lock's yards. So many of his plays, you could see him panicking in the pocket, not certain of what he was looking at and just taking off and running. And you're seeing so much now of this now with Wilkes is that he's really attacking these quarterbacks. He's not just letting them sit there and diagnose, that he's making them work. And Drew Lock he was so confused, so rattled in that game. And they were constantly baiting them into getting an alert fade to DK Metcalf. They were showing single high press man on DK, which if you watch Seattle's tape in previous games, they would almost always alert that to DK's going to run a fade, because DK is one of the best fade route runners in the league. And so if they see press man against him with no safety over the top, they're going to alert to that every time. So they would see it. You'd see Drew Lock look out there, and then at the snap they would roll Tayshaun Gibson over the top of DK Metcalf. And every time Drew Lock would be looking out there, oh, it's not. And now he'd try and get back and work his progressions, and it's changed. And now you have these guys coming from all these different directions. And Drew Lock was just panicking and taking off. Sometimes he got out. He did. But it ended up in multiple sacks where he was just literally walking himself into sacks because he was so confused, so rattled. And it got to DK. He was getting so frustrated. They kept rolling Tayshaun Gibson over the top of him. They'd show him, okay, we're going to give this to you. We're going to give you this press fade down the sideline, and then they take it away. And they hit the one at the very, very beginning of the game. And then after that, they took it away and were baiting them into that look all the time. I loved it. I absolutely loved it from Steve Wilkes. And the way he's calling defense feels so much more comfortable than it did at the beginning of the year. I think that's the best way I can describe it. It looks like a defensive coordinator who feels comfortable with his calls, comfortable with the team, trust in that. I think I talked early in the season about how it felt like there was just a lack of trust. The coverage didn't trust the pass rush. The pass rush didn't trust the coverage. Steve Wilkes didn't fully trust the guys to execute the coverage. And right now, there feels like there is so much more trust on every single side. The coverage is willing to jump some of these routes because they know the pass rush is going to get home. And Steve Wilkes is willing to move guys around on the defensive line because he trusts that they're gonna still execute their job. And he's willing to disguise more pre-snap because he knows that these guys will get to their landmarks and read the releases of the receivers better. The best way I can think about this, the closest analogy I can think is back to we talked about this very beginning of the 49ers, last Super Bowl, of when Mike Shanahan came on in the early 90s and took over as offensive coordinator for the 49ers. He had his own system, but he came in and he had to learn the West Coast offense system. He had to go back and watch Bill Walsh's tapes and Mike Holmgren's tapes and learn the offensive system and then try and run it himself. And we had Jesse on the show, Jesse Zapolo, and he kind of talked about that by that second year, Mike started adding his own flavors to it, and it really started to take off. And you look at that first year under Mike Shanahan, it was good. It wasn't 1994, and this starts to feel like that Steve Wilkes is coming in and he's trying to learn the 49ers defensive system, and he's got to get comfortable in exactly what they do. And now he's starting to add his own flavors to it. We're running some coverages that I didn't see before, that now we're running, that were stuff I saw Steve Wilkes run when he was in Arizona, that he ran against like Jimmy when we were in Arizona, or when he was in Arizona, that I'm seeing him run now. And I'm like, hey, I remember that coverage. It's a Fangio coverage. We didn't run that before with D'Amico Ryans. We're running it now, and I like it.
Yeah, it's been been awesome to see. I do have to sound the bell. We do have from one of our Niner faithful, Lisa says, "Good morning, guys. It is so early in California," which reminds me that I do want to take another moment to thank Steph for joining us, because she's also on the left coast, and so it is early
Mountain
in.
time, actually.
Okay,
It's an
so
hour ahead.
okay, so you're
Okay.
not
Okay.
as early. It's the latest for guys like me, as it is 11 a.m. now on the dot on the East Coast time zone. So again, thank you to
Is
Lisa.
Indiana really East Coast, though? I
Well,
mean
it's East Coast time
come
zone.
on.
Now, what's funny is if I
It's the
drive to the
Midwest.
left, if I drive to the left about 45 minutes, I'm on Chicago time. So I am in a weird spot in Indiana. But again, thank you so far to Steph for joining us. Remember, guys, if you have not hit hashtag Steph, make sure you throw that into the chat if you are live with us, as we're boosting the algorithm. We have about 70 people watching with us live. Be sure to, if you're watching this later, it may be because you didn't hit the notification bell. So as you're showing friends and family this channel, make sure that you show them the Brock Purdy video, the for MVP. That's the best one I think that's up right now. And make sure they hit the notification bell. Again, Steph, a few more questions here for you, but give us another breakdown for those that are just joining us of where they can find you again. We'll get into some more questions.
Yeah, first I wanted to shout out Joel because he said it's 2 a.m. Where he's at,
Yeah.
and that is crazy. That's some dedication right there. So shout out Joel. Um, yeah, so you guys can find me at Steph49K on YouTube, on Twitter, on TikTok if you like the Nick Bosa impersonations, Instagram as well. And that's where you can find my podcast, 49 Carrots Podcast, also wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, a couple more questions regarding last night. Did anyone can we just take a minute? Like, what in the world? Like that interception. So I was at the bar just casually watching. I look up and it was like a high school play. The dude and that broke the franchise record for the Raiders for most points or something. But what, like, did you see that play live? Did you watch any of that, Steph? And here's my main question. Um, are we losing a 49er coach? One of our coaches, are they gonna go like tomorrow? Are they shipping off the head over to help the Chargers? What is happening?
Well, Brandon Staley is definitely done after this season. I think we can pretty much set our watch to that. That's interesting because I think in years past we've been really worried about like in particular the defensive coordinators of the 49ers being like the hot commodity every season. And I don't know if I feel the same way about Steve Wilkes, and here's why: because Steve Wilkes has been a head coach before. So that may give some other teams pause, although, it might help, right? Like, obviously, like, having that experience does help. But at the same time, I think when you look at D'Amico, when you look at Sala, they were guys who everyone saw as like, oh, like up and coming, like, they were they were grew in the building, like of the 49ers. And I think along with the offense too, and all the guys who came up in that building and Kyle Shanahan's system as well, like these young guys who you can kind of see are the next big thing. I feel like it was the same way with Sala and D'Amico, right? And they really liked the way that the energy that they brought. Players love them. I'm not saying that players don't love Steve Wilkes, that he doesn't have energy or anything like that, but it's different. I don't think Steve Wilkes has that same appeal to a team like D'Amico and Salah had, especially for really bad teams. Really bad teams need something that the fan base could get behind, even if it might be bad at first. Like, they need someone who has, like, I guess, the character and, I don't know, just the energy that those guys brought to get the fan base behind them, right? And get the players behind that coach as well. And so I don't know if Steve Wilkes is that guy. I just don't like, I don't think that that's how he's perceived by the league and by other people. So because of that, I think the 49ers are going to be able to keep Steve Wilkes at least another year. Now, if he puts together another season like this, he'll probably get some nods, and he'll get some interviews and whatnot. He might still get interviews this cycle too. But ultimately, I think for that reason, he'll probably be able to stick around. And on the offensive side, there isn't anyone that, like in years past, that has kind of been like, before you used to hear guys be mentioned on the broadcasts, even like, oh, like this guy's he's been under Kyle Shanahan's wing and he's the next big
Right.
thing, like that's when they're probably going to be on their way out. I really haven't heard too much of that this season, which is kind of surprising, honestly. But yeah, they don't. I think they're going to be okay this season. I don't think anyone's gonna leave.
Joey Nichols says Clint Kubiak.
Clint Kubiak, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe next year.
Yeah. I keep wanting to call him San Diego, but the Chargers, the situation there with the Chargers is fascinating. I don't know which side of the ball they're going to go for a head coach, because Brandon Staley was a defensive head coach. It was a defensive coach. He came in, and then they get Justin Herbert, and the idea is now you're going to pair this great quarterback with a really strong defensive system. And they've had so many issues this year, and almost none of them have been on the offensive side of the ball. They'd been able to still score points. They've been able to move the ball, and Justin Herbert had been playing really well, but their defense has been straight garbage. They have been so bad on defense, and they have players. They should be a lot better on defense than they are. And so I sit there and wonder, if I'm the owner and I'm looking at a team that just gave up 42 points by halftime. I turned the game off at halftime. I was like, I don't need to see Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders, put up more points than 42 points. And then I checked this morning, they scored 63 points. You're going, that's insane. Like, everyone was going bonkers when Miami scored 70 points in a game, and the Raiders, the Raiders, they scored 63 points. A 5-8 team without that much talent scored 63 points on the Chargers. And I think I put it out on Twitter last night. I think it was like when it was 28-0 or 35-0, whatever the score was, that like, this is what it looks like for a team to quit on a head coach. They have straight quit on Brandon Staley. And, so if I'm an owner, I'm starting to look at that and go, our problems this year have not been on the offense. We need somebody to get this defense squared away, because if we can match a great defense with this quarterback, we really have something. You look at some of these teams around the league that have been playing really good defensive ball, and when they have a quarterback, and you're like, look at the Lions, they've been playing good defensive ball for a lot of the year, and they got Jared Goff, and they've won a lot of games. And you look at the 49ers, they're playing really good defense, and they have a quarterback, and now they have tons of weapons on offense, but they're winning a lot of games. When the Philadelphia Eagles, when everyone was like they are the best team in the league, not this year, last year, but their defense and that defensive line was eating, and they were really good. And you see the advantage that gives. You see the Bengals, what they've been able to do, that with a backup quarterback now, he's playing really well, but Cincinnati has a much better defense than anybody would give them credit for, and they're still in contention here. We got Baltimore coming in a week and 2 days, or week and 3 days, that has been playing as the best defense in the league, and they're looking like they're probably going to be the number one seed out of the AFC. So, if I'm an owner, I'm thinking, yeah, we do need a defensive head coach that's coming in, but somebody who's going to be able to get this defense straightened out. So, who do I start thinking about? You're looking at, some different defensive coaches. I put some out on Twitter last night. I'm trying to remember exactly who I'll put out there, because it was all guys who'd been head coaches before. But you're looking at different guys, like Dan Quinn. Is Dan Quinn a guy that? He's had Dallas's defense humming, except when they play the 49ers. So do you look at bringing Dan Quinn in and giving him another shot as a head coach? This was a guy who made it to a Super Bowl. Do you bring him in? Do you bring in a Steve Wilkes, who has been a head coach and is operating a really good defense in this league? Where do you get? Does Arumo from Cincinnati, does he get a chance as a head coach, being a defensive coordinator? Does he come in and be that? I don't know. And now there's also Harbaugh sitting out there in Michigan. That'd be interesting to see him in LA. That'd be awesome. I think that's something that the entire NFL needs to see, is Harbaugh in LA. But and you just wonder, is that something they need? They need something to straighten it out. And I'm with you. I don't see Wilkes going there. I don't. That there hasn't been a lot of buzz. But again, if the 49ers, a lot can happen in the next 6 weeks. And if the 49ers are rolling into the Super Bowl with the number one defense and shutting down everybody along the way, I think I kept wanting to say San Diego. If you're the Chargers, I think you're looking at that situation and saying, you know what? If we can hold teams to 20 points, we're going to win a lot of games with Justin Herbert. So I hope he stays. I really like where they've gotten to now. And I think what you're going to see is this defense just be even more cohesive as time goes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Steph, who, I don't know if you would have one, and so I'm giving you an out to say multiple defensive MVPs or MVP
for the
49ers or league wide.
For the 49ers, yeah.
That's tough, and I only say that because it seems like there's a lot of guys playing at a high level right now, but not one that's like, I guess far and away the defensive MVP. Certainly you can mention Nick Bosa, since I think the defense as a whole has played completely different since the bye week. So for all of these players that I mentioned, I would be like, since the bye week, he's been awesome. Nick Bosa, of course, being one of those guys. And then, I think Mooney Ward as well. And I'm tempted to say Lenore. It's just like the secondary has stepped up. Once they made the switch to Lenore being, the nickel corner, I think that has changed the way the secondary has looked. And so that's credit to Lenore for being able to have that versatility, and not just the versatility to do it, but do it well, because that's a really difficult spot to defend. And he's been doing it really great. So yeah, I'd say it'd be between, Lenore, Bosa, and then I'd have to say Mooney Ward. But like Eric Armstead too, man, that I just keep rattling off names.
Yeah. Hey, I love the shout out with Lenore.
Greenlaw,
the
Warner.
Yeah, I
Man.
mean, I love the shout out to Lenore. That was one I wasn't seeing coming, and one you don't hear a lot about, And I remember I was watching Crocker's show the other day, and he was talking about Lenore, and he had a comp for him of Terrell Brown, and I thought about it, and I was like, I love you, Crocky. I disagree there. To me, Samuel Womack, his comp is Terrell Brown. I think size wise, the way they play, I see Samuel Womack more um, as the comp. Um, and the as far as sorry, Adam messaged me and I got to respond, and I can't think about two things at the same time. But Demo reminds me a lot more of Carlos Rogers. If we're going to go back to
Mm.
that 2011 2013 defense, then I see um, and Zach, hey, look at that with the big time super chat. Zach Shrout, he says Demo defensive MVP, and it's one of those like as she was talking, I was sitting there going, I'm going with Bosa. I'm going with Bosa, and I was putting together my argument, and then when you said Diamador Lenore, when you said Lenore, I was like, man, I'm having a hard time arguing against that.
Because it's like,
And
think about what the nickel position looked like before Lenore. We know it was
right,
Isaiah Oliver. I'm sure between either of those guys, there could have been someone better, but not on this team, right? So just that difference, that switch, how it's kind of changed the entire defense in a way. Uh, Man, yeah, that's a tough one. And because Zach, paid $50, I think we have to call Diamador Lenore our
we have
defensive
to.
MVP.
We have to.
I think
Demo
that's
is
how
the
that works.
defensive MVP, but he reminds me a lot of Carlos Rogers. One, size, his length is very similar to Carlos Rogers, and Carlos Rogers also had to have that task of outside on base in base defense, nickel in sub packages, and that is so much harder than people want to actually think about. Everybody thinks, well, it's a corner, it's a corner. You're covering a guy. No, your technique is different. So again, not to get too deep in the weeds, and I tend to do that sometimes, but like if you look at what do we mean by technique? So for example, technique on an outside corner in read to or palms coverage, which is something that we run a good bit amount of, which is a converting coverage. It's cover four unless the number two receiver. That's why you call it read two. Sometimes because reading the number two. If he runs an out route at 5 yards or less, then it converts to cover two on that side of the field. So the technique that the corner has to play with, he's supposed to be 7 yards off the ball, lined up on the outside shoulder of the receiver, front foot up, back foot or inside foot back, outside foot up in his drop back, keeps 65% of his weight on his front foot, 35% of his weight on his back foot in a kick step drop with his as opening up and reading through the number two to the quarterback. Okay, that's his technique, and he's supposed to be able to do this as he's dropping back. So like that to get your body to do that and be in that kind of a position, and they want the elbows at a 90-degree angle, the hips slightly bent forward. So like there's a specific write up that's 2 pages long for how the outside corner is going to play palms coverage in his technique, talking about specifics of where your feet are, where your weight is, all this stuff. Okay. It's very detailed. And he's going to drop back. Now you move to corner or you move to slot guy. He is not in that same stance. He is not practicing that same stance. He's now got to be inside shoulder of the slot guy, head up on him, balance feet, weight 50-50 on each side, and he's got to be leaned farther forward, arms at a 90-degree in his drop back. Like the technique that you use just in your drop back is very different. And people, want to underestimate, like we don't always talk about this of you move from the outside to the slot. What you actually have to physically do is the muscle memory is different. This is the NFL. This isn't where, okay, yeah, big deal guys moving in there. No, 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 no. This is the NFL where the margin of success and failure is razor thin. And so you cannot be off on your technique. There's a reason why they coach this way. And so now you have to get in there, and now you're playing. That's just for one zone drop. And now you have man coverages where you have to now go from playing one sort of man technique, and you're covering a two-way go. Now you're covering a three-way go. You have different ways that you're funneling to help. Like, all of this stuff is very different. And so it's a big deal for Diamador Lenore to have to go from outside to inside. And this is still a rather young guy in the league. We're not talking about a 5-year veteran, 6-year veteran like Carlos Rogers was when he came over. This is a younger guy in the league. So, and what he's been able to do with that defense, Steph, I think you're absolutely right. And I think you nailed it. Like, he is low key the defensive MVP. And Jair Brown's pick on the throw that went to DK, that was caused by Diamador Lenore being in perfect position on that throw and disrupting the timing off of the line against DK. DK was funneled about 2 yards farther inside on that route, and the dispersion of the routes between him and Tyler Lockett were about 4 yards off. DK should have been about 4 yards deeper down the field to create more separation between those two guys, because at the moment that ball was in the air, those two guys were about 5 yards from each other. That is terrible dispersion. Those routes should be farther apart to stretch the defense more. The reason why it wasn't because Diamador Lenore had jammed DK and funneled him inside, rerouted him, and then undercut the route and was in his hip pocket. And so Drew Lock was trying to get the ball out over the top of Diamador Lenore and away from him, and it ends up going right to Jair Brown. Jair Brown played it really well, but that was set up by Diamador Lenore playing that so well, and it's things like that get unnoticed. And I think you nailed it. You converted me. Like I was sitting here thinking it's Nick Bosa, it's Fred Warner, and now I'm like, man, no, it's gonna be Demo. Demo is the defensive MVP right now.
Love it. Love it. That is so awesome. A couple more questions, Steph, because we don't want to keep you your whole morning. I'm sure you got some other content to create, as we love to see it. Let's talk a little bit, and I only say a little bit because I think the predictions are going to be 50-0 for this game. One question I have is, do we look at this like, hey, divisional opponent, and hey, we do need to try hard, or is it resting guys who have nursed some injuries, and are we looking to not hold back, but kind of hold back? I guess I'll say that out loud, right? What do you see for Arizona? And then give us your prediction for the score, and we'll have the chat do the same here in a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. I mean, the 49ers have a ton of injuries to track this week, and the big one for me was Dre Greenlaw. He said he's going to play, or Steve Wilkes said he's expected to play on Sunday, so that's huge. For me, that changes everything, because I was kind of looking at this game and thinking, okay, we might have both starting defensive tackles out in this game, and we might be missing Greenlaw and Oren Burks. Like, that's not great. So yeah, having Greenlaw there is definitely going to be a boost. And so I think for the other guys like Hargrave dealing with a hamstring, you want to be careful with that. You want to be careful with those soft tissue injuries, like Mooney Ward dealing with the groin too.
Yeah.
I saw a clip of Mooney Ward at practice yesterday. He was working out off to the side, but he looked to be moving well, which, like, I would think, maybe he's going to be able to give it a go on Sunday. But at the same time, yeah, you do want to be careful. But you still have to play hard, because this is a divisional opponent, and you never know how those games are going to go. The last time the 49ers played the Cardinals, this is a completely different team, really. I mean, different quarterback. They got a lot of
is
guys
now
back.
benched in Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. So
He played
a
well.
lot of changes. Yeah, I mean, Dobbs has had a Linsanity run at each team that he's been on,
Yeah.
and I feel like the
Good
loss
pull.
against the Niners
Insanity.
was like the end of his Linsanity run with the Cardinals, and so then he just went to another team later. But yeah, like I feel like the I lost my train of thought. I think you still have to play hard. You can't overlook the Cardinals. I mean, Kyler Murray is still a very talented quarterback, still very capable of having his way on offense if you aren't careful, right? So my concern going into the game with the injuries was, man, you're missing a lot of guys on defense. Okay, are they going to be able to run the ball? Because, like, the 49ers have done a great job of stopping the run these last few weeks. and it's kept opposing offenses one-dimensional. Okay, you got them right where you want them at that point. And so that was my concern, that if the Cardinals get their little run game going, then that can open up a can of worms for the 49ers defense. I feel better having Greenlaw out there. And Wilkes seems to have a lot of confidence in Kinlaw and Givens if both Eric and Hargrave are out, which, like, I'm kind of assuming that they will be at this point. But a lot of guys got to step up, so we'll see how they do, and it's going to be important to obviously contain Kyler Murray, which is easier said than done, as both Kyle and Steve Wilkes indicated. Like, it's a bit of a different challenge than Jalen Hurts. They do both have the running ability, but slightly different styles of it, right? So I think Kyler's just this like annoyingly shifty dude who can like evade tackles and make you miss. He's quicker. And so I think that's kind of the danger with him. You can't really let him run loose on you because he could make you pay. So that's my concern. But at the end of the day, like, the talent gap is so large between these two teams that the 49ers, even with the injuries, as long as they, play to their abilities and they're not playing sloppy football, they should be able to win this game. So my prediction is 38-19.
All right, I love it.
That's very close
Yeah,
to mine.
Kyler definitely looks like that toddler who stole his mom's phone as he's running around. Um, like,
Yeah.
I heard somebody say that a couple years ago, and once you hear that, you can't unsee it. Like, you cannot unsee that. Um, but this game is shaping up that it could be like the Falcons game we had in 2019. If you remember, the team was
Don't
playing
say
at a
that.
ridiculously high level all
Don't
the way
say
through.
that.
Don't
Then
wish
they
that
got
on
a
us.
bunch of injuries, and they were coming in against a team that was really struggling. Nobody was taking seriously, and next thing
Yeah.
we knew, it was like near the end of the game, and we had a 3-point lead, and then Julio freaking Jones gets a score with like no time left on the clock, and they win the game.
So
And and that's the only concern I have, is that you have these injuries piling up. But the difference that I feel like with this team right now is that the team then, you were starting to see holes being poked in their armor of that 49ers team. The offense was playing really well, but the defense was having a lot of struggles during that stretch. And like, it was setting up to where if the offense started to falter a little bit, that the defense could not really be relied upon at that point in the season. They had lost D Ford, and the defense completely changed. They started giving up like 29 points per game. People forget that about the back half of that 2019 year. They remember the first 7-8 games where we were dominating everybody, and the defensive line was just killing everybody. But the last like 8 games of that season, 7 games of that season, we gave up almost 29 points per game as a defense. They remember then, like the playoffs came around, and we got D Ford back, and the defense, we dominated the Packers, dominated the Vikings, but that defense was having issues during that stretch. And I don't feel like it's that same situation right now. This feels like the defense is having less holes poked in their armor now than they did at the beginning of the season. That the defense is not, being at a point where people are starting to figure out what they're doing. It's actually, the defense is starting to figure out what everybody else is doing. And so that's where I feel a lot better about this game. I do want to thank Lisa again for the super chat. She says, off topic, those not from California, what made you a 49ers fan? So let us know in the chat, what made you a 49ers fan if you're not from California? I've told this a few times. It was my mom. My mom grew up in Oakland. She was not going to be a Raiders fan, and she used to go to games at old Kezar Stadium. So the 49ers game, her dad would take her to games at Kezar. And so yeah, she grew up a 49ers fan. I then grew up as a 49ers fan, and in the 80s and 90s, and never looked back. But yeah, this game, I'm thinking the hard part is, Gannon's defense has the potential of the way they're playing to play well. But I also look back at, they played pretty well when we played them last time, and Brock Purdy still set the franchise record for completion percentage in a game, where he only had one incomplete pass. I mean, it's rare that you actually watch tape and go, I don't think the Cardinals played that bad on defense, and our quarterback only had one incompletion. I just think and it kind of goes back to last year's NFC Championship game, why the 49ers felt so confident going into that game that they would have won if Brock Purdy was there, because Kyle's system lends really well to attacking what Jonathan Gannon does as a defense. And so, it's not always in that Arizona just doesn't even have the players. The system there does not match up really, really well against what Kyle Shanahan does. So even if they play above, punch above their weight, I don't see them actually slowing the 49ers down. I'm thinking 35 to, let's go with 13. I think they score one touchdown, get 2 field goals. That's what I'm thinking.
We're all pretty close. I in the chat said 35-17. I am exempt from my 49ers story as I was born in San Jose, so I am from California. So that is my story. We heard Steph's heavily influenced by her brother. Very cool. Yes, in the chat, make sure 75-12. 49.
That's a bold prediction there.
Yeah.
49er Holic. I would almost call that a homer take, but I
Man,
don't know.
yeah,
I mean,
maybe
just
not.
maybe slightly.
Oh,
He also
Dondell.
he also could be a closet Cardinals fan and is just being a realist.
Yeah, 49er holic. Yeah. As Dondell says, she's married into being a 49er fan over
Oh, she
here.
is in the chat. Good for
Yeah.
her.
Hope you're feeling better, Don. We heard you
It's not been good. The stomach bug has been going around the house. My daughter had it first, now the wifey had it. It was a long night for all of us. Yeah.
So one more time, guys, remember to as Johnny gets the link ready for the shirts, I always like sneak that on him and he's like, "Oh yeah." I will let you guys know. Remember, if you are watching us live on YouTube, it is probably because you've hit the notification bell. So make sure as you're showing friends, go up to strangers wearing Niner gear, show them the channel, show them Steph's channel and say, "Hey, I got some really good content for you guys to watch if you haven't seen this." Hopefully they say, "Oh yeah, we're big fans and we've already ordered shirts." As the link is in the notes there for our gear. Johnny is wearing his black number today, the XOXO I love, and then it's the X's and O's as we go through the whys and hows of the game. If you are catching us later and you're like, "Oh, I'm frustrated because I missed these guys when they were live and I want to jump in the chat," you didn't hit the notification bell, weirdo. So make sure you hit that so that you can join us. There's usually around 100 people that we chat with. We love it. Steph, again, thank you so much for being here. One last time, give all the details of where we can find you. And guys, pay attention and make sure that you subscribe and follow Steph and give her all the love as well as we give you the love. Steph, thank you so much. This was awesome. It went by so fast. I feel like we could go another hour, but we won't keep you.
I appreciate you guys as always. This has been fun. You guys can find me at Steph49K on all the social media platforms that I am on: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the YouTube, and my podcast, 49 Carrots Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and YouTube as well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much. Yes, and to Technic Chick, yes, the shirt just got the notification earlier being shipped out to my dad today. Awesome, love it. Make sure one thing too I want to point out, email us at Johnny Dell Football Academy at gmail.com too. Your questions, we'll get it on the air. And if you have a picture of you, if you're on Twitter, tweet us a picture with you with the shirt, as some of you have done. Love seeing that. Love seeing you guys wearing the gear. Very cool. So for Steph and Johnny, I am Adam Marino. Thank you guys so much, faithful, for joining us. Take care of each other. Stay healthy. And as always, go Niners.